Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as written? Do I have a second? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Have we had a chance to review the meeting minutes? We have a motion to adopt the minutes as written. Do I have a second? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have public comment tonight. Well, hello. Would you like to come to the microphone?
I need to give my name and address.
For the record, do you have to give the address? Oh, just the name. Okay.
Okay, yeah, Joel Haugen, address unknown.
Okay.
No, being on the public side of this is nice in a number of ways. I actually feel encumbered and free, and so that's pretty cool. And so what I would like to offer to just chew on going forward is to think maybe in a little different context and think big and think long. So and when I say think big and think long, so we've been bantered about, Mike and I have talked about this for years, maybe decades, about the park and rec district, and an independent park and rec district that collaborates with the city and the school district and is in the middle, independent, could have tremendous function. Mike and I both served on the original park and rec district that was the boundaries coincided with the school district. The problem we had back then, there was no revenue, so there was no tax base for it. But that doesn't mean that couldn't happen. That'd be a voter approved proposal. So, and you put that in that context, that opens up a whole raft of avenues that you could chew on. And so in thinking big and thinking long, and so, there could be just some amazing things, and parks are broadly supported by the public across the land. So that's really cool. And then there's another issue, and this might kickstart something like this. Mike mentioned to me last fall that a fellow by the name of Bill Holdner, he's age 95, and as a legacy project, there'd be some potential for him to donate some of his property. And so, and that is something I think the Park and Rec District, and especially if you use that as a Kickstarter for a Park and Rec District, an independent Park and Rec District, maybe this could be the board right here, is to think about maybe how could you approach something like that. And Mike knows Bill Holdner, and that might be an interesting and entertaining thing to do. But in that context, I'm going to pass around a map of the holdings of Mr. Holdner for you to just maybe chew on. You can ask some questions.
Okay.
Maybe of Mike too.
Anybody have questions?
To the point of the Parks and Rec District, which I think is an excellent point. And I think that is kind of the necessary long-term funding mechanism and management that we may need as we look to expand our parks. And so that is something I raised at the 50-year planning committee relating to parks. And so I can continue, I mean, if this group is supportive of that, continue to keep that kind of, at the top of the discussion when it comes to, okay, having a vision for our parks is one thing. How do we maintain parks and have a sustaining model? So
I think I think this has been brought up several times. I know that I've heard also kind of like the challenges that we're faced with already the taxes kind of reaching their cap and some of those challenges. And so I think that it would be great to have like a big open discussion, especially with maybe the city being able to speak to some of the challenges and maybe what they think we should go, the direction, like being able to have kind of more of an open forum rather than, because it seems like we kind of broach a subject and move on and broach a subject and move on. So I think it'd be really nice to be able to have one meeting where we spend a lot of time focused on being able to discuss this.
You want me to give you a little background? I mean,
Yeah, love to.
like Joel said, we both were on the original park rec committee, and it was voters adopted a board of directors, they adopted a district, but they didn't. There was never any funding, and at that time, city want to didn't want to partner. To be honest with you, it's really frustrating because without the support of the city, there'll never be a district. So it just languished for, and they kept trying to hit home runs, building these $6 million pools and get 42% of the vote, and it just didn't happen. So when we did our last master plan, one, it had 175 people show up at the town meeting to give us their feedback. It was, people said it was very enthusiastically supported, and there was a lot of there was a lot of interest in a district. But I think where the cities, um, they kind of thought, we don't really have much to sell right now. Let's try to build up what we have so that people can build more constituency. Because at that time, this park was empty. There was no Concomly, and city didn't own Chapman Landing. They didn't own. Um, they really were extraordinarily park deficient. We're still deficient, and so the thought was, rather than spend a lot of energy on trying to create that district at that time, let's try to build up Grabhorn Park and Chapman Landing, and this trail was. I came aboard with Joel. The Chapman Trail of Chapman was going to be a boulevard. The trail was going to be on the other side, and because of his leadership and council's leadership, we were able to avoid that and create this wonderful trail. And so I think a district's a good idea. I just don't know if it's just right the right time, honestly. Some point in time, but like you say, there's compression issues. And the last thing I want to talk about just a little bit is Bill Holner. I don't know if any of you know Bill Holner, but he's an accountant. And he's owns all that property where Means Nursery is out on the dike. He's really extraordinarily wealthy, and he had two children, and one of them was Randy, who ran all of his farms. One of them is up Dutch Canyon. It's 100 acres, and anyway, Randy was killed last summer in an accident, and so Bill is seriously contemplating maybe donating that to the city, to an entity, a public entity. But what he really wants it to be is a place. This 100. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a 100-acre field. It's beautiful. The South Scappoose Creek runs all along the border. Then the forest lands surround it, and it's a really spectacular property. And he wants it to be an open space in memory of his son. And it's also a place where the elk love to hang out.
Mhm.
And so it would be, he wants it to be kind of a reserve like that. So maintenance for the city would be fairly minimal. And the fact that they take all their water out of the Scappoose Creek, it would be a nice way to try and protect that riparian area. So I've been quietly, quite anymore, but I've been quietly working with him and the city about this project. And I think there's a real chance that it happen over the next year or so. And yeah, that would be all in the county. But if you think about it, county Chapman Landing is it's not in the city either, and we felt like we had to take it on anyway because we didn't have a district. So the city's about that. Sorry for talking so long.
No, I think it's great. Yeah.
Well, I think just to interject, because I did some more research when I brought it up this last time, because I was on a couple of committees in St. Helens for a long. And the reason why the city of St. Helens has a Parks and Recreation District. Oh, thank you. Been in broadcasting, you think I know this. The reason why the city of St. Helens has a formal Parks and Recreation Districts because they have the pool. So, and then I had assumed that they had, because they also have like a Parks and Recreation rec area across from the McCormick Park. So I assumed that the funds came from the Parks and Rec, but it didn't. It actually came out of the general fund. So it's I mean, I think it's a really great idea. The thing is that you have to get buy-in from voters, which is not impossible. But what that means, I mean, it's kind of like you almost have to do a business plan
Mhm.
of here's what you're going to get for your money.
Right.
No, that's essentially what the city did very successfully. I mean, I was happy to do the marketing for it, but with the fuel tax,
Right.
if you just simply say, "Hey, give us money," no. If you say we need to repair streets and so that's the approach that you're going to have to take to actually make it happen. But
Okay.
it's more complex than I had assumed.
Okay. Paul, did you have a?
Well, so a question to you, Mike. So, obviously this guy's elderly, so time may be of the essence. So what is the objections or things that are in the way of just getting this thing done? I mean, I've seen you work really quickly, like when it came to the Grabhorn property. So what is the things that are in the way right now?
He's fine.
I've met with Bill several times and, we kind of, he's still working, still an accountant, still has a lot of clients. So he wanted to wait till after April 15th. And so, he's met with Alex and I. And so we've been working with the city attorney to try and put together a deal. And one of the things that he wants to do is there's a barn on the property and a trailer, and he wants to partition 5 acres off of it. And I think, we're talking about trying to make this all happen by fall. His plans. But you're right, he is, and he acknowledges, hey, I'm getting up in the years and something we need to do. And so I think we're doing pretty good right now. I'm probably going to meet with, I have a meeting with him next week, and I'm going to just keep pushing it for the city. And then I've been working with, with Cole and Pete, but I've not really, until you, it's a deal, you don't have anything.
Okay. Is there anything that you would need from us?
No,
Okay.
what I'll do is I'll keep you, updated, and as long as the city helps with the legal transfer of title and that kind of stuff. And I know they've, Rory's been involved a little bit, and I know, Peter Watts has been involved, but, honestly, 2D thinks this is important too. As, all of our power comes from Sunnyvale, and we're all aware of the battles between fish and hydro. And right now there's a discussion about closing the 4 lower Snake River dams, which is 20% of the power that we receive. And so there's been about 20% of your electric rate bill that you pay goes to dam and mitigation projects. So, my argument is that this is really important habitat, and UD, and actually Bonneville buys a lot of property. So, if I run into an issue, we're always, the main thing is just going to be open space. So that's pretty low.
Yeah.
Honestly, we talk about our 50-year plan and these elk herds and go up Dutch Canyon, and we're up there, and we got to think about them too,
Right.
our habitat.
Yeah.
This site is their favorite site just about, and that's up to a lot of property that is owned prime forest and will always be. So got my fingers crossed, and just quietly working.
And you might notice there's a really nice parcel on the east side of the highway there that Golden owns as well. That could be an interesting.
He's not. He'd sell it, maybe.
Well, only one thing with that, Mike, is if Lori is a key player, she's leaving May 11th. So if we have to start again,
Why?
I don't know, but I know she's leaving May 11th. So if she's a key player in this and we have a period without her, it might be prudent to get as much as we can get done without starting over again, especially considering his age.
Lori's going to North Plains.
Thanks.
I have one
About-
more comment.
what was that?
One more comment.
Oh, go ahead, Paul.
And secondarily, Jeanette, welcome. I would ask, I think that it's amazing that we were talking about the district, having a parks district. and JJ's mentioned it many times, now that you're our liaison, maybe you can work with the city to find out exactly what has to happen as opposed to us just talking about it here.
So that's,
Maybe it's through Isaac or whatever.
Yeah.
But come back with okay, for you guys to get to a certain spot, these things have to happen.
yeah, that was my next comment is Isaac, I would like to know if we can maybe set aside some time in possibly the June meeting to be able to have the city have this discussion with us so that we can actually see what's possible, what the timeline would look like. Because if we know it has to be thinking long, very long term, then it'd be nice to know like what steps we would need to take in order to even be able to achieve something like this eventually.
Can I butt in again?
Yeah.
My thought is, when I first heard you guys were gonna redo the master plan, I thought, why are you doing that? It's only 5, 6 years old and there's some big projects still exist, but all the things that master plan is going to help you do is identify your costs. And that's the thing that this one we have now didn't do because it was done by a rare student, but it didn't really identify the projects, the costs, and how much you really need to try and generate and explore the options like a district. And I think that would be honestly, I think that would be a byproduct of that
Yeah.
process, honestly.
Okay.
This is just my 2 cents.
Isaac, do you have any comment?
Yeah, I think that we can have that conversation in June.
Okay.
We can do a little poking around and see what we can find. From my understanding, special districts are separate government entities and they're established by the membership or whoever becomes the board. So typically it goes to the voters in some fashion because it usually comes with a tax rate change because of the assessments to establish the district. So it'll probably take some kind of a vote by the people that would be in the district, depending on the boundaries of that district. So it would get proposed to the voters. And again, typically some kind of a community group does that. In this case, it sounds like it would be the Parks Committee membership kind of working on that, or some amount of you, or some kind of a nonprofit, or just a loose group. But yeah, we can poke around at that a little bit and bring something back in June.
That would be great. Thank you.
I was just going to say there's 3 elections involved in order to create a district. When I was on the county commission, we created the Scappoose district. So basically there's 2 ways to get a district. It's either by the vote of the people, or you can have the county create one. So they have the power to create a district. You'd have to know where your boundary is. And then the other election would be to board members. Then the third one would be for funding. So there's three different elections that are involved.
Okay. All right, good.
I don't know if we've asked that in the past at any of the town halls, how people having another tax or anything. I don't know if that's ever been brought up. I thought.
No, it hasn't been brought up at the
Well,
town halls.
So here's the thing about the tax rate. As we get into that discussion a little bit, just to understand, is that typically what happens is like you're not creating a new entity doing a new purpose, right? You're creating a new entity doing a purpose that's already served by the city. So what happens with the tax rate is it's not necessarily an added percentage, but it's assessing a tax that the city no longer assesses. So the city's part of the portion of the taxes we receive and assess go to providing parks for the people of Scappoose. Basically, that tax assessment would be transferred to the district. So it's not necessarily a new tax, it's just pulling that portion out of what the city assesses and giving that money to the district to operate. So it's a little bit nuanced, but it's not really a new assessment. So.
Okay. All right. So I think that gives us some things to think about, and I would like to table this discussion. And
One more question on the property, specific to the property. So if for whatever reason the city is not capable of moving on this with some haste, what are the other options for kind of setting it aside for preservation? Is there a route with the county, or do you designate like an alternate entity, nonprofit?
You know, one of the, just kind of
that a-
FYI, one of the challenges of Columbia County as a whole is when people leave property or whatever, you have to set up a trust. So probably the simplest way would, if holder does have a trust, that he would just change that and change the trust. So that would ensure that that would actually happen.
Spoke with the folks from Bonneville who do this with Bonneville money, because Bonneville spends a lot of money on riparian area, the Wallace Ranch down towards Rainier, you know where that is? About that, and put white-tailed deer there. And so that would be another option. I've spoke with those folks. Um, Mr. Holner's kind of interested in the city. He had a pretty negative experience in the county several years back, and I think there's a chance that he would ever even consider the county. But I'm hoping that we can work it with the city. If not, find a way to make it happen.
All right. Yeah. Please just continue to keep us updated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. I would like to table the district conversation until June. So that gives us just some things to be thinking about. So that way we can move on with our regular agenda. But thank you for your comment, Joel. I think lots of good discussion.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So first thing, I do want to welcome Jeanette Santiago as our new council liaison. So congratulations on your new seat. Looking forward to having you here tonight. Good. So first on our agenda, we have our city update.
So in terms of parks, not a whole lot. We've been kicking up in terms of parks maintenance as we start swinging towards the outdoor season. So there's been a lot more mowing going on and maintenance in the parks. That'll continue to tick up. Today we got contacted by the group that is donating the bench for Creek View. I don't know how many of you are aware, but Citizen contacted me about a month and a half ago. And there was a woman in Scappoose who frequented Creek View. She lived down the block, took her dogs there, and she passed away. And one of the honor societies she was part of wanted to do something nice to memorialize her. So they're donating a bench. So right now that's in discussion with Public Works about where exactly to site that and how to place it in the parks. I think that's really all that's not covered under another agenda item. So if there's any specific questions about what's going on, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll let the meeting move on.
Okay, great. Thank you. So for our annual town hall meeting survey questions, they are the third page in. Kim created these questions for us to have asked at the town hall meeting. So I would love to have everyone kind of review it and just give us your feedback to see if there's additional questions. I think these look fantastic.
Yeah, and if I can just give context, kind of, the objective of what we were going for, we certainly wanted to keep it short, so it's accessible, people participate. And I think at a high level, we wanted to understand which are the most utilized parks in the city and which are the ones that people may have least awareness about. So that's what you see in the first two questions there. Because in past discussions, we've, gotten the feedback from the city that it's really hard to tell what the use patterns are and, who knows, where parks are. And then in the last couple questions, just talk about, signage, what type of signage people would like to see, both in terms of getting to the park as well as once they're in the park.
Well, I think this is great. I think the one thing that's missing is, the amenities. I mean, or what the requested amenities are. We kind of talked about it internally. We've done it through our grab horn committee. And it kind of comes back, a lot when we talk to city council of like, geez, does anyone even want pickleball, or do we really need a softball? It just seems that this is these are good questions, but it's kind of based on what we already have versus, asking. And it might be, maybe it's not a good time to ask this. Maybe it's going to be somewhere else down the road. But another, we're going to have a completely new group of people, hopefully, that we're going to be able to talk to, and we can talk to them about what amenities do you wish we had here in Scappoose, and that could maybe take us somewhere. It could be more open spaces, and that could help get this elk property. It could be more ball fields or whatever.
Did you have?
So I would imagine that would be very much an undertaking that happens during the master plan. That's just an assumption. But I wouldn't be opposed to are we going to have a table, Isaac? There. Parks and Rec, are we having a table at the town hall?
So I had talked with you about having a table, and I thought that at the time, the feeling on the committee was that people were going to be pretty tired from the Earth Day celebration, and that instead of a table, you were going to do a questionnaire. However, that can change. We have space, so that has not been
Although,
allocated.
if I can just interject, so we've had tables there in the past. There's just not a lot of foot traffic. So, I mean, if you do something where, like 1 year we had maps of all the different parks,
Mhm.
and then we had it instructed they would go there and mark what they liked, then that was very interactive. But just simply having a table there is you're just sitting there sad.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say is if we had a table there, maybe we had like a, a list of those that people could just kind of like check off and offer their elections.
But they're going to do that with the clicker.
Not specifically for
No,
park
no,
amenities,
they're not.
so,
Oh, okay.
right. So
Yeah,
we're at this, with this, we're just gonna have these surveys available for people.
Oh, okay.
And we
Okay.
were specifically targeting signage just because this is part of our goals. And so we thought this would be an opportunity to just be short and sweet, not provide too many questions to where people just kind of lost interest in the survey and didn't finish it. And we could begin to uh, work towards that particular goal. So kind of just siloing that goal. I mean, we do have the extra foot traffic, but then sometimes it just becomes,
I mean, I guess the other option to still keep it tight and succinct would be to just add one question with a drop down menu that would say like, of this list of amenities, choose like top desire for the parks. And it wouldn't be necessarily park specific, but it could be general categories like outdoor recreation or walking trails, something like that.
You might be able to get the same information off the first two questions. I mean, if you ranked your parks that you liked or didn't like, you'd be, that would be this, pretty much you get the same information as opposed to what I didn't visit or whatever. I just think that amenities, people ask for amenities. It's kind of our thing that I don't know if you hear from the citizens. I hear it all the time. when are we going to have this, or is there a possibility for this? It just seems like there's a need out there by the citizens, and it'd be nice to get that information. If it's not here, it should be somewhere in the process.
I would agree. I think that process will come with the master planning.
The Parks Master Plan,
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
right? But this is for the 50-year plan.
Oh, this is
No,
for the
this-
annual
no.
town hall meeting. That's
Right. The town hall meeting is also for the 50-year plan, though, right? I mean,
But this was just to feed into our annual goals.
yeah, the goals that we created.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Mhm.
so Isaac, when is I know the town meeting is about the 50-year plan. Are there any questions about parks and parks amenities and things of this nature?
So that's why I had my hand up. So I wanted to make some clarifications about the process for the ATM this year and about what's going on with it, how we're presenting it, because I think there's some lack of communication or confusion. So first off, we're not using clickers. Second off, the way that this is structured is around the 50-year plan very heavily. So what's going to be going on is that it's going to be split about 50% is going to be a presentation about the 50-year plan, where that's at, releasing the initial data from some of the work that's been going on around the housing needs analysis, and kind of talking about where the plan is and where it's going. That's going to lead to the second part, which is a open forum, small group discussions. Basically, we're going to be presenting a high definition, very large map of the city to groups of 8 to 10 people at a table with interactive components to start mapping out the city of the future the way the group thinks about it. So green spaces, schools, roads, bike and walking paths, other public facilities like libraries, things like that. And then they're going to report back to basically create and help us understand what the city's looking for to kind of create a shared vision for this project. So there is a component about parks, but it's going to be a very broad component at this point. Does that kind of get at your questions a little bit? I guess
Yes.
there's one more portion too. So for the survey questions that you are compiling, because we're not doing the clicker and kind of opening it up to a question and answer like that, we have a packet of information everybody's going to be getting that's going to include data on the 50-year plan, talk about the community conversation kits, and there's going to be a couple of surveys involved that we're going to ask people to take. So one of them is a report back at the end. Was your experience? What did you take away from this? Is there anything else you want to tell us? There's also the parks questions. There will also be some other information in there for folks. And so that's kind of how we conceived of it at this point, because we're really trying to get heavy on that visioning for the community to really kick the 50-year plan off.
Mike, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Isaac, you said that you're going to look at the city. You're going to look at the kind of the school district boundary, right? For the future city, not just strain yourself to the city limits and
Well,
growth boundary, right?
So yes and no. So the 50-year plan project is looking at three major components. One component of this is looking at our development code for the city, which is only inside the city boundaries, and looking at how we want to change that, how the city does, the citizens do, the entities that work here want to change that to create the city of the future. A second component is looking at the urban growth boundary and trying to assess whether or not we have enough space available for all of the parties. So that would be the school district and parks and libraries and all these things, and figuring out what do we need to do to adjust our urban growth boundary. The third component is why we call it the 50-year plan. And what that is that's looking at what's called urban reserves. And basically what urban reserves does is it takes your data from the housing needs analysis, economic opportunities analysis, all these other technical documents, and it extrapolates for 30 more years to take that planning horizon all the way up to 50. And it kind of establishes a joint managed zone around the urban growth boundary where the county and the city would kind of have this joint ownership of these areas, as it were, to protect them from not negative, but anti-development code expansions, so that in 30 years or in 20 years, when we need to expand beyond the current growth boundary, there's not a steel factory where people think there should be a park, or there's not a park where there needs to be a road, things like that. So it's going to be both. It'll look at city boundaries, it'll look outside the city boundaries a little bit, but because the development code and the urban growth boundary are not linked to the school district boundary directly, it's kind of a yes and no.
So this is probably similar to what Washington, Multnomah, and Clackamas County did to the urban ag reserves. Are you going to be looking at agricultural reserves too and forest reserves as part of the?
That's a portion of it. I think that's going to fall into kind of like the green space category generally, and less specific to those two topics. But as we get to that phase, depending on what the data says, it could honestly, go either way.
Just appears in the context of what he just said that our questions should be more broad around, the big picture stuff and not signage and things. It'd be confusing, I think, for people in some ways if we're talking about this city of the future 50 years down the road. I mean, maybe we should take another look at this, or I don't know. I'm just.
I'd love to hear from others in here, what they feel like they would like to see the questions.
These survey questions are for our goals, right?
Correct.
The perfect. I think it's a perfect gauge to see how we can gauge our goals. Where the value questions I see are, what do we want to see on the signs? Obviously, I think everybody's going to say yes to. Would you want additional, or would you like more interpretive? So, kind of what I'm wondering is it possible to get these questions on the city newsletter rather than trying to get interaction through the home meeting?
So one of my thoughts is that one thing that I feel like we talked about when we were doing the grab horn process was survey fatigue. And so if we want to do kind of like a smaller survey at the annual town hall meeting and then potentially save like our bigger, more global questions for the city survey, I think we should be thinking about that too, so that we don't just inundate people constantly with questions about parks, because they start to get frustrated.
Right.
Is the feedback that I end up seeing. So, I mean, we could go more global, but that isn't necessarily targeting any of our specific goals. And we might be needing to refine those more goals when we go into master planning in a couple months. So, I mean, just things to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I see these as goals.
So-
Like, I think we're gonna get signs out there, right?
Right.
I mean, so what do we want on those signs? Do we want arrows showing, arrows showing where the signs are and giving us distance, giving us the time to walk there? I mean, that's exactly, we want as much response from the city members as possible. I
Right.
mean, however we get it out there.
Right.
I mean, so
Gotta
I think
have
the
those questions.
conversation beforehand was getting off track to this survey.
Right.
So
Right. Isaac, do you have a thought? Comment?
I have quite a few thoughts, actually. I never put my hand down. So in terms of the city newsletter, the deadline for those things is typically the 5th of the month to be released on the 25th of the month. So we've missed the deadline and there's already a survey in there. Well, we haven't missed the deadline, but well, yeah, we did, but not for the May release of the newsletter. There is always the question of survey fatigue. I think that it seems like the kind of feedback you guys are looking for is kind of all over the map. And I feel like this could be a conversation with the community. And I know that sounds really like tacky or whatever because the community conversation hits, but you were planning on having a community conversation anyways. It might be appropriate to have these questions at the community conversation forum of some sort because, I mean, maybe multiple avenues. Maybe that's one of them. Maybe there's a survey. We can do those things. I don't think the city has any surveys planned after the Peace Candle one wraps up at the end of May. So we could look at doing something through both of those avenues. But it seems like some of those questions that are being asked could lend themselves to a community conversation or could lend themselves to that kind of a lens on it.
JJ?
So, and I appreciate what Isaac is saying, but I also hear what you're saying. And I think, I think these are all good conversations to have, but at the end of the day, people do want signage.
Yeah.
And basically you can ask the community, or you could actually take some action like going to Portland or going to communities that actually have effective signage and then bring that back. Because, or just come up with a plan.
Well, I think like some of the questions that Kim asked are specifically like, we really want to know what parks nobody is going to.
Oh, absolutely.
And do we know why?
Right.
Is it because they don't know that they exist?
Right.
Do they know how to get there?
No, I think that's really relative. But I think that, having signs to go to parks and to know how far things are to bike really is just, I don't see why the community would want to weigh in on that. People just, that is something that is normal. I guess that's what I'm saying. In cities, that's normal. That's what happens. It's like people, say, okay, if you're in Portland, it'll tell you the zoo is 2 miles this way if you're going by bike, and it'll take you 20 minutes. And they're kind of over the top, but I think it's just common sense that, yeah, people want to know how to,
Right.
but I think it's also very relevant that a lot of people don't know about these parks. And so maybe the question to ask is not so much where are these parks, but what do you like to do in parks? Like, for instance, Paul's been killing it on pickleball. That's great. So do you like pickleball? Do you like hiking? Do you like fishing? Do you like watching the water? Do you like swinging? And I know these are general things, but I think that those kind of questions are the ones that are going to really go, okay, well, we have, during the pandemic, 171% increase in hiking nationwide. So I think those kinds of questions can kind of drive what people want.
So, yeah, I would love to be able to dive in and make a plan for the signs. And it seems that that's perhaps what our public works department is starting to do because
Yes.
Dave has said he's beginning to address signage. And I guess my goal with this data set would be to be able to take that to the city and say, we're not sure exactly what you're planning for signage, but we want to make sure that you're including this is what the people want in terms of what's in their parks. So it would be more, I guess, of like direction to give to them for the broader planning. Because what we also don't want to see is like disjointed signage, right? Like I think we want to come with a really comprehensive
Right.
plan that looks thematic. So that was kind of, I think, the hope with this is give us some direction in terms of what we recommend to the city.
I would agree. So, I mean, one thing that we could do would be to, so one, some of my feedback when, in one of the next topics was I just created the scavenger hunt for the city for the Earth Day. And I mean, there were so many opportunities for information in the parks that were just lacking. Like Chief Concomly Park, like that was chosen because that was an indigenous person who settled here. And so, but there's no information regarding Chief Concomly at all in the park. There's nothing about the large oak that is very old in the park. There's no information. There's nothing about Chapman Landing and the history there. And so, I mean, I think that, so I put that on the amenities list because I think no matter what the public says, I think that information needs to be there. And so potentially, we say, because I really like the first two questions, I do feel like it's really important to know where the traffic is. And what parks people aren't visiting, because I think we need to do a deeper dive and figure out why they aren't visiting there. Is it because they don't find it? It's because there's nothing there. It's not of interest. So maybe we could potentially keep the first two questions and then ask maybe one or two questions that are just simply like, what are your favorite things to do when you go to a park? And what is something that you would like to see in a park? And we could keep it potentially simple.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Thoughts? Isaac, sorry.
Can I? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I wanted actually that something was on my mind, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit regarding signage. So, I've heard the word wayfinding used, and I found out some really interesting information about the history of wayfinding in the city of Scappoose. I was talking with Alex about this signage, and it turns out that we've had that conversation here in the city before, and what that conversation was about wayfinding signage along Highway 30. So yeah, it's traffic and not parks, but it's still a little applicable. And so the actual term of art, or the actual technical term wayfinding, is a conversation about city districts and navigating between focal points in the city. So, for example, in Portland, you have a very definite east and west side. You have a very definite kind of like industrial up and coming area. On the inner east side, you have a very hip hopping area along, Alberta, Albina, Mississippi, all those areas. You have Northwest Portland. You've got these various areas, St. John's, right? And the wayfinding, when you say wayfinding, it's talking about a really, really collective, comprehensive vision of a city and getting people from one section to another. And so, in that light, when we talked with ODOT did not endorse using wayfinding signage on Highway 30 because we couldn't define districts in the city. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there as when you're talking wayfinding, are you talking about actual wayfinding, or more like, signage at parks that helps get people from one park to another, gets them to City Hall, tells them where, maybe someplace to eat is, tells them about interpreting history and things like that. And so I just kind of want to put that out there as a thought for you to digest.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of envisioning, like you do see in St. John's, if you're biking, it'll tell you like by minutes times, like
Yep.
how far you are.
Yep.
And so we could determine if walking, biking, whatever the appropriate modal of transportation. But yeah, like if you're in one park telling you how long it takes to get to another park and some signs on the way that kind of the arrows will direct you there.
And I think that's really relevant. And I think the other thing that, in regards to what Isaac was talking about, because sometimes like with the Main Street program, which I was pretty active in for a while, they did kind of refer to wayfinding as more of a kind of discovering areas. So, but you're right, that is the more correct definition of that. But the other side of signage, for a lot of people that do exercise, whether it's biking or hiking or whatever, they want to know how far they're going.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, like on the CZ Trail across from Highway 30, they have signposts with mile markers. And I don't know if that extends through Scappoose or not, does it? Okay, good. So, but that is really important for people that exercise. I mean, if we're talking about biking and stuff, you also want to get a workout. So like when I go ride around Sobeys Island, it's 13 miles. I like to know
Yeah.
what my time is.
I think Paul has brought up, like when we look at Malala and the other cities, I mean, one thing that Scappoose has going for it is that it is small. And so when we look at like, why can't this be like a more walkable, bikeable area?
Mhm.
I think that's where signage kind of plays into it because we can know like here's a safe path, here's the distance. And so that is kind of like a bigger picture that I'm also envisioning for this signage. And that's yeah.
If I can interject, and I've been a road bike rider for 25, 30 years. The signs come last. We need a trail master plan. And if you look at Portland, they don't just willy-dilly put how many miles. They go through bikeable, they're either on sharrows or on bike paths. There is actually a liability to sending somebody onto a street that's too dangerous to bike. So it's a bigger picture than just saying, oh, bike over here. I mean, you can imagine someone doesn't know the city and we're going to send them down over on Route 30, for instance.
Right.
So it's, I think we look at it and go, hey, if we really feel like we want a walkable and rideable city, it really comes from a trail master plan that says, how do we get from this side to this side, that north, south, east, west, make that part of the master plan. If we're going to do that, maybe we keep the signage simple at this point, and then we can build it up from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I want to, Isaac, do you have your hand up? Okay. Okay, so I want to make a decision about this or because we do need to have this, we will not have another meeting before the town hall meeting. So we need to make a decision about this tonight. So I'd like to hear input on what everyone would like to do.
I think the first question is excellent. And I think Kim makes a great point that, part of the reason people aren't going to these places, they don't know they exist. So I think that's very relevant.
I would like to, I would also like to keep the second question for
Yeah.
sure. I think that will help us know why. Or it'll give us a question of like, oh, wow, nobody ever visits, X park. Like that will give us the opportunity to, to figure out why. And maybe that is where we focus our little bit of our attention to. So I would for sure like to keep that.
Will you please add and why? So for instance, we find that Chapman Landing is, people are hiking all the way to Chapman Landing, or more of it's because it's fishing, that some people like to do.
Okay.
We'd learn a lot from that, I think.
Okay.
I think signage is a great idea, and I'm not opposed to the questions, but I just want to point out that the reason why a couple of these parks are not highlighted because there's not adequate public facilities for them to park. And for instance, Vista, we were talking about trying to some parking. There's no parking up there, and um, that if you try to draw people to an uncomplete park, thought is try to get it. And that's why there's no signage out to the Turtec is because it hadn't been built yet, but signage to that now was a good idea.
Yeah.
All house signage, but sure a couple of these parks are, we want to promote at this point. We have the facilities to public. If we want to, cars going up to
Vista.
just, our chief saying, send all these people up to my park in my yard. Just a thought.
Do we want to take Vista Park off this list?
Well, it is a park, so I think we'd leave it on there.
Okay.
And just see what people respond to.
Okay, so then we have the first two questions. We ask why they have never visited. And then what two follow-up questions. What are your favorite things to do in parks? What would you like to see? What amenity would you like to see of more in this park? In Scappoose.
Great.
Okay.
And are we taking up the sign discussion at a later time? Because Where does Dave say in here he's working on signs? So was it just at Vista Park?
Yeah, Vista Park. And then there was some signs that he was working on. And then we could keep, would additional directional signage be helpful in accessing these parks? Just keep that, see how many people say that. And that's an easy question, one line.
I guess,
How many of them are going to say no? I guess is the real question.
so I guess we need to just figure out how and when we have a conversation, because this data was going to kind of be a catalyst to, I think, having the conversation with the city about direction of signs. Unintended. So I guess we just need to figure out then, okay, when do we come together as a group to figure out what the sign need is and how we really begin to tackle that with the city, so it doesn't just get kind of further pumped down.
I mean, we could, I would, maybe we take off the last two questions of the interpretive signs in the park, and then what information would you like to see available? Because I think we'll add that based on the needs of the park. Because we already know that Chapman Landing needs information about the history. We know that Chief Concomley needs information about the history and the riparian area. So it would be, I feel like it would be interesting to know how people, because this next question about additional directional signage gives us an idea of how people like to get to the park. Like, do they like to drive? Do they feel like they need actual more directions? Do they feel like, yeah.
Get to the
I like that.
How do you
question.
get to the park?
How do you get to the park?
Oh, okay.
It's a great question.
Okay. And then so that kind of hits a lot of key areas, but it's still short and to the point. Okay. Are you able to?
Yeah, Isaac, do we just have like a standard amenities list that are ready for this city, or do we have something to work off of with general categories, or?
We don't have a categorized list of what we have at parks. That's kind of where the utility of this came into in terms of amenities, was that we've never really surveyed them. It's been more ad hoc in terms of like, oh, this happened to be at this park when we installed the park. This is something that's needed that we noticed or somebody mentioned. So you guys are really on the cutting edge of defining what that list is and all the things that come with that.
Paul, do you have a list in
Yeah, I
mind that
do.
you
I
would-
did a study of similar sized Oregon towns and have a list of their amenities. And that would be a good start.
Can you send that to me?
Yes.
Okay, correct. Okay, thank you. All right, so I would like to move on from this. Any additional questions or comments? Okay. So the next is an update on Earth Day. It is this Saturday from 9 to 1. So we've got the cleanup occurring at Chapman Landing at 9 a.m. If anybody would like to participate, please go on to the city link and go to solve and fill it out. We've got the scavenger hunt that is live. There's a QR code to it, so it's completely earth friendly. You can just go online, do a Google form. I'm really excited. And I hope that everybody, if you guys see it on social media, it would be fantastic if you shared it so people know about it. JJ, do you have any updates?
I do. So the businesses have been very generous for this event. Fred Meyer is going to be donating breakfast goodies for the volunteers in the morning. Starbucks is giving us coffee. Means Nursery is donating flats of veggie starts as well as flower baskets. Fred Meyer's also donating flower baskets. They gave me bags of seeds because I'm working with the library. So the library is going to have a children's activity where they're going to make wildflower seed balls, seed bombs, I guess is what they call them. And then Fultana's is going to be donating pizza. So when everybody's done picking up trash, they can have some great pizzas. So, and the weather's going to be great.
Yes.
Lumber River PUD is going to be there with a booth. They're going to be handing out information there.
Oh, also, Scappoose Bay Watershed Council will also be hosting the guided nature walk.
So that they will do that. Okay.
As
good.
well. And
Yeah.
so I think that's going to be
And I also believe Master Gardeners is going to have a booth.
fantastic.
So yeah.
The Scappoose Bay Watershed Council, they're going to be bringing in not only information about just the environment around, but just how the indigenous people also used the space. And so I think it's going to be fantastic. They were very excited about the information they wanted to share. So
So we're going to do the sign up at 9 a.m. Kara had said maybe someone wants to help us with that. So if anybody wants to volunteer.
Ryan is going to be there for us.
Yay. Okay.
So he will, yes. So
Oh,
Brian
great.
will be there, hosting our information to the scavenger hunt and where the activities are, et cetera.
And then, Fred Meyer's also donating 7 cases of water.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Also, Brian was able to get a prize, the NWTA membership for a family. So it's a $100 value for
Great.
one of the winners of the scavenger hunt.
Yep.
So yeah, we've got lots of great prizes. We just need people to participate. Okay. Questions, thoughts, comments?
Thank you, JJ. Great work.
It was fun.
Good. Okay, so the amenities list. So I sent out that amenities list and Dave Suka came back and said he's already working on a lot of it. So his updates were fantastic. It was a good opportunity for like reading through the list. He just had some questions. I let him know that we were working on some of the signage questions and we would be able to get back to him on that. I think the next step would be to have the city review the amenities list because there's some things that are going to be possible this year, some things that are going to be not possible this year, some things that are kind of out of their scope. So they wanted to review the list internally and then get back to us, and then we can send it off to council. But does anybody have thoughts or comments on that?
Just to put a little nuance on that.
Yeah.
Essentially, some of the things that were suggested are already planned or are being done or have been done. And some of them just are not possible at this time for various technical reasons that would require more effort than a small change. And so really, we're not trying to cut things for frivolous reasons. We're trying to refine the list to make it more effective because some of those things are complete or are in the works already.
Right. There's some things where we're suggesting a bench and a bench is going to be there next week. So we don't necessarily need to send that to council.
Well, this is a good time to be talking about that because this is when the city's putting together their budget. So I imagine that making them aware of those and, makes it just Jeanette something to fight for when she's meeting.
Absolutely. Okay. Does anybody have anything they want to that they didn't see on the amenities list or they would like to?
Well, I just want to point out, because I have been wishing to get, things done on Chapman Landing because so many people are there.
Mhm.
It's just shocking. And there's no seating, there's no picnic benches, picnic tables. And one of the things that and maybe Isaac can clarify this for me. Jeff, our librarian, said that that the parks is going to have a number of picnic tables put in Heritage Park for Earth Day. Is that correct, or do you know anything about that?
So first off, I went down to Chapman the other day and there are at least 2 benches and 1 picnic table down there. As for Heritage and what's coming, I don't know. That would have been coordinated with Public Works on another level.
Okay.
It's entirely possible. I know that we did move some picnic tables around this week, so there might have been some movement of those over to Heritage for Earth Day.
Oh, good. Well, and then my other comment on the picnic tables, I think we need a couple more picnic tables down at Chapman Landing. One of the concerns was people stealing picnic tables or vandalizing them. And so I talked to a couple of other entities that do parks. And one of the things that a lot of parks do, because we can't have permanent structures at Chapman Landing due to the dike situation, but what you can do is put temporary picnic tables there and you secure them with chains. So what you do is you get your picnic table, you get a chain, you chain it around a tree, and then nobody can steal it. And that solves the problem. And then when you need to remove the picnic table, unlock the lock and problem solved. So that would go a long way to solve that. And then regarding the pad, the concrete pad, which I'm extremely concerned about, and I'm glad they're working on it. I sent Kara an article that came in the Oregonian. Metro was sued. What was it, last year? Someone was on a bike and they ran through a wire in one of the parks. The initial judgment was that the park had immunity, and then they went and appealed it, and it ended up costing Metro $300,000.
It's a lot.
So, and they settled it. And so my point is that I think it is absolutely essential that we put some kind of fencing or something around that concrete pad, because even with signs, there's a huge risk that somebody's going to get seriously injured. And that, and I think I was talking to Mike. I mean, you're probably looking at around $5,000 to do that, but it's money well spent compared to somebody getting seriously injured, and just it's not good for the city. So I err on that we should be concerned about the health and welfare of our users of our parks, and having that there and not doing anything is irresponsible.
I've noticed that there's signage up already.
Yeah, they did put up signs, so I was really happy about that. But the problem is that 5-year-olds can't read, and so that's the challenge. And you've got a lot of families down there, and so I'm really concerned. So that's the issue.
Okay, it is now, I want to continue on that, but it's now 7 o'clock. So Isaac, we're going to continue. We have to vote on that, correct?
It's good decorum to vote on it to make sure, just to be respectful of everybody's time as a group. Yes.
Okay, considering the next 2 meetings are going to be of decent size, and we've got just I think a good chunk of things to still continue with, I would like to vote that we continue. So I have a motion that we continue.
Oh, I make a motion for that.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, so let's,
Are we still on old business or are we on new business?
we are still on amenities list, really, yeah. So I think, so we have that added, the city is aware, and so we can,
I would recommend that, I would maybe put a motion up for the Parks Committee to maybe draft a letter stating that we think it's important to put some kind of fencing around that concrete area to ensure that people aren't on that pad and something bad happening.
okay, do I have a motion that we put a fencing around the concrete
So
pad?
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I totally appreciate the concern that you have, particularly for, younger
Kids.
residents.
Yeah.
So I was talking about this with my high schooler, and his friends were like, "What? No pad?" So, there is another constituency there that kind of has a different use.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's a great use for the pad. I think ultimately what needs to happen is, I'm talking about this is just a short-term solution. Ultimately, what would be great for that pad is if we had fencing going around it, and actually maybe use the back part of that pad with signage about Chapman Landing. And then I mean, it's just like going to the Grand Canyon or something. You go and you see it, but you don't cross the fence. And so, I mean, that's the other solution. If we come up with fencing that and access, because the other problem is that you've got that skinny little piece of concrete that's not safe for people to walk on. And so if somebody falls off that accessing the pad, that's a problem. So if one solution would be to just simply put up railing along that skinny walkway so that you ensure that people aren't falling off. You're doing everything you can, and then just putting up fencing around that. I think that's a great idea, because I think it's a great viewpoint. I think it's a real asset, but as it is now, it's a death trap.
Mike?
A little history, it took a tremendous amount of work to get Chapman Landing into the city's hands. We ended up going to agree to 25 points for the county. Part of that was we were going to move diligently to develop it to some degree. Our criticism of the county was they owned it for like 12 years and hadn't done anything, and it was grown by blackberries. And I got to tell you, I give Dave Suka immense credit for the work that he's done out there to make it really such an asset. We had homeless people out there living in the in the bushes and all that's gone because the city's really taken it to the next level. And I know that, well, actually Dave and I went out there with a gentleman named Andrew Jansky. He's an engineer that has done a lot of waterfront development. Actually, he's the one who designed Scappoose Bay uh, Park, park there, and he's done the riverfront in Vancouver and a lot of projects. And he was helping us to try and work through the necessary core permits that were going to be required to develop that site. And it was a little bit complicated and slow. And so there wasn't. And the one thing they said is you can't put anything in the dike. So it's really complicated to do stuff there. But what we did determine that we could do is take a couple loads of, that pad you're talking about. If you look there in that narrow thing, that's kind of taking away the bank. And really what that engineer's suggestion was to put a couple loads of big riprap, big rock in there to kind of make it a little safe so people wouldn't fall in that hole. The rock's not that expensive. And then maybe kind of, fill it in and then put some kind of fencing around that, some kind of a wrought iron fence around the pad so that people wouldn't fall. And that was really kind of what was, and we talked about trying to put some kind of fencing along the other frontage there where those big logs are, but you'd have to put those on that would be expensive either. So I think there's some really low hanging fruit there.
So what I think we could do, because I don't necessarily think that we need to be the ones to figure out how to make it safer, but we could say that we would like, as the Parks and Rec Committee, that we recognize that there's a safety hazard here, and we would like to have ideas evaluated on how we could potentially make it safer, whether it be through fencing or through some of those suggestions. But we see it as a need, and we feel that something should be happening sooner rather than later.
Yes, and I appreciate that. And I also like, Kim's idea. I think it's a great, I climbed up there, so I
Yeah.
think it's cool.
Yeah.
But, and so in that context, stating, is there a way that we can make this safe so it provides greater uses to the citizens?
Do you guys know what that pad used to be, Betty?
No.
That's where we used to swim when we were in high school down there. That was all log rafts, and the big 80-ton crane that sat on there. The log trucks would take that down that road, and then they would go around. That big crane would strap a load of logs to that crane, dump them into the water. I was all back sold that property. They took that crane, but anyway, so it was built to hold 80-ton crane. So it's
A lot of people can be on
pretty
there.
stout. Anyway,
You see how
All right.
safe.
Okay, so do I have a motion to, yes,
Yeah, so I would say if we could put in that motion three things.
yes,
Proper signage to decrease the city's liability.
okay,
Safety measures that will improve safety, but also keep in mind existing uses and not fully restrict access.
Yeah.
yes, I think those are perfect,
Very
yes.
gr-
Because I definitely, I would agree, like, we love that. We love the concrete
Yeah,
pad.
I
It's
love it.
fun, yeah,
Yes.
so, okay.
Get that, Susan?
Yeah, did you get that? Do I need to repeat that?
well, I'd support that motion, but I really hope that we send that motion with an acknowledgement that the city's done a tremendous job out there.
Yes,
Because I don't want them to
Absolutely,
think that we're saying, hey, you're falling down here. They've done an amazing job, and Dave's done an amazing job, and I think he'll fix it.
Yeah.
But I think
I agree. And I mean, I just was so shocked because like Mike, I've been here since the beginning, and we went first that place and it was like, it was so bad.
Mhm.
And it was just like to walk out there and to see the channel and just how beautiful it is. I mean, I've talked about, another thing we can do is we could go like to the Audubon Society, which cleaned up Sobeys Island. I lived there for 17 years, and they took one of the parks that was like a 3-mile loop and cleared out all the blackberries, and then they put signs about birds. It's a great birding location. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do I have, you may need to help me out here. Do I have a motion to give to the city, to make a recommendation on how to best make, the Chapman Landing,
Improve signage to decrease risk of liability to the city.
uh-huh,
put in something to improve safety measures around it, but would also not completely restrict access, so people can still responsibly use it.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
I,
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Kind of back to the amenities list. I, is everybody okay with the city reviewing our amenities list? Seeing what needs to be removed because it's already happening, or seeing what is not in their scope or not possible, and then getting back to us with that amenities list and us reviewing it next meeting. Are we okay with that? Okay. All right. Fantastic.
I guess my only thing on that, the Vista Dog Cleanup Station, because I am a Vista Park user,
Mhm.
the answer there was no utilities on site to facilitate this. There were, it's a post and a container. I mean, there were no utilities on site to kind of facilitate dog waste cleanup up at the water treatment plant off Keys, but
Mhm.
we stuck a post.
So
I guess.
I think we can get some nuance on that. My suspicion is that because there wasn't a lot of detail, he might have thought that something like that would include like a spigot to wash their paws or to rinse them before they get in the car, something of that nature. So as we're going through this list, we can ask for some clarification.
Perfect. Okay.
And make it more like a conversation, because this could go back and forth over time. Like if we have a point like that, now that I know,
Yeah.
we can find that answer and transmit it between now and the next meeting. And if there's further questions, then we can bring that back and then present everything at the meeting so the public can be informed of the conversations that are,
That sounds fantastic. Okay. On to new business.
Old business, sorry.
Yes.
Mike and I were asked to update the liaison list.
That is not on the agenda tonight. So I can take that with Mike, and then we can discuss it.
Officially, I'm giving it to you.
Okay. I'll just leave that there. Okay, but we'll, thank you. And then we will be able to address that at another meeting.
So did Mike.
Thank you, guys. Okay, new business. City update. Isaac, that is you.
Yeah, that's me. So we had a list of questions that came through over the last month, and we responded initially with some, really quick off the cuff answers, and then we followed up with some more robust answers. And so I kind of really, I don't want to go over what's in the packet and those answers and things, but if there's any additional questions or clarifications or more conversation on those points, I think that's kind of what this agenda item is designed for. So if anybody has any questions on that or comments about what we said, like that's kind of what this is for.
Okay, I think we can begin with JJ's update. And
for Chapman Land,
Chapman
absolutely.
Landing.
So, as I said, what I've really focused on is really investigating a park that is so similar to this, which is Butteville Park by Scappoose Park out by Wilsonville. It's extraordinary how similar it is. It's a little smaller in size than Chapman Landing, but it has a lot of the same issues. It's got a lot of rock, but it's not rock that you fall 10 feet to your death. It's just rocky and difficult. But what they've really done is they've really come up with a way to integrate that so it's user friendly for people, and yet it's still very rustic. It's a very, very simple plan. They've come up with some really great signage that talks about the history, because basically Butteville Landing was a major ferry landing for that area. And so, and it's got a beautiful river frontage on it. And then they've got basically picnic tables, benches, and just a little map. And people love it. And so I still believe that with Chapman Landing, we still need to get 2 more picnic tables down there. And if we chain them to trees, then they will not disappear. I also think that by having signage, and I'm really grateful that they've done the signage for the vandalism and everything else. But I would even encourage doing signage about people just, kind of like a neighborhood watch. That it's a park watch, and that if they see something, to report it, and that just kind of keeps people aware that people care about this park because people do care a lot about that park. I'm really surprised at how excited they are about it. But also the idea of having other places for people to sit is that if they're parked all the way down by Highway 30 in that area and walking all the way up, it's kind of like an achievement. So I would even say having a couple of extra benches, although that's going to be more difficult to secure on a temporary basis, will really make a huge difference. And so, I mean, it's simple things that we can do that will really make a big difference. So 2 more picnic tables, maybe another bench or 2, and I think, and then doing the safety thing with the pad will be excellent.
You added those to the amenities list, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
I
perfect.
didn't add the picnic tables, but 2 more picnic tables would be great. I think they took another picnic table down there, but chaining them to a tree will solve the problem.
Okay. Right. Do we have any other questions regarding the city updates that were sent out?
Yeah, so, in the city council meeting a couple of about a month ago, there was a question on what was going on at Grabhorn. And I think that just shows that the community was such a hot topic at one time, and then it's kind of gone completely silent. It's been almost 8 months since we gave our recommendations on what to do with the Grabhorn parcel. And we haven't heard ourselves where we are with the process. So I wanted to bring this to the table, especially Isaac, because number one, we would like to know, but number two, I think the community is very interested. And we really haven't said what's going on. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up. Is there a plan for the city to maybe say something at one point back to the public of where we are with the process?
I just have a quick
So-
thing to interject really quick. So my understanding is that there's still an issue with some of the wetland area and the Army Corps of Engineers. So I don't know the extent of that, but I think that's what's really holding stuff up.
Whatever, I think the community is very interested in what's going on. And from the city itself, it would be great to, do you have a plan for that, Isaac?
So when Grabhorn wrapped up in, what was it, August, September, and everything went back to council in September. See, it was October, November. Yeah, so it's been about 6 months, pushing 7 months. So what happened after that was that your recommendations about the design went back to council. Council looked at it, sent it back to us and said, okay, these are the things that we want to consider. We engaged with a design consultant because what we need to do next, of course, is to redesign the park. So they went through and did some initial design work. And one of the requests was to look at the trees, the cedar trees on the edge of that property, the west edge of the property. And another request was to look at what appeared to be a wetland in the northwest corner of the property. And so the design consultant had to contract with a subcontractor to do those various works, and those folks were extended out. And some of the wetlands work needed to be done in slightly drier conditions. Sometimes it's hard to tell where those boundaries are when it's pouring down rain all the time. So we still don't have a final report, but it is imminent. As soon as we have that, we'll share it. It's just we don't have final data to share. It would be premature because we don't have that data, and it could change, between a preliminary and a final, or become more defined between the two. Any data now would be, it wouldn't be as meaningful because it wouldn't be 100% accurate. So that is coming. I just don't know when. I know it is on the very near horizon. I just don't have a date for that final report to be available to be shared. Once we have it, we'll do what we said we would do, which is share it with council, share it with the committee, and interface through the methods at which council asked us to do, which was to work with them and the committee to further refine the design.
So potentially, depending on what information we get and when we get it next. I mean, Isaac has done a really fantastic job with increasing that transparency of the city with social media. So if we learn new updates, I mean, at that point in time, we might be able to say like, hey, Isaac, we'd love for you to be able to share this through Facebook. This progress is happening, or this progress is happening when it seems meaningful to us and the council.
Sure, and our intention's not to be behind closed doors. It's just when things haven't happened for us, it's hard to update everything and say nothing's happened. People want to hear things have happened.
Also, I mean, it really needs to be something that's exciting for the public. Otherwise, they might begin to tune out information that comes from the city. So,
That's
I mean,
that's part of it. I mean, we're
Yeah.
not trying to be behind closed doors or be furtive or anything. That's not our intention at all. The intention is to get only the real data out, because sometimes what happens is if we try to stream data out to the public, people listen to the first thing they hear, and it can create the wrong conception of what things are or aren't. And so for something like Grabhorn, where it is so prominent to the public and it is such a big hot button topic and it is a complicated site and there are all these other pressures, we want to be really clear about what the information is, so that we can all stay on the same track of developing that park. We don't want to have to be sidetracked by correcting information or misconceptions, because it's always hard to get on that shared understanding of something. And I think that we feel that with the Grabhorn Park Committee, we were able to substantially get to the point where everybody has some level of shared understanding about what it is, where it's going, what the community wants, what it doesn't want. So we want to be careful to preserve that kind of relationship with the community through this process.
right. Okay.
Like,
Yes.
first of all, so you say there's wetlands up there where we parked all those cars? I mean, I don't know who said there's wetlands on that upper northwest property, but I would strongly disagree with that. And it's pretty easy to get a wetland consultant, somebody like Van Stavern, to take a look at that in a day, give you an opinion, or even somebody from Division of State Lands. But I guess, and then also an arborist, we built commonly, we put that parking right under the tree, and an arborist make sure there was going to have an effect on that beautiful 300-year-old tree. It should be, you might light a fire under your consultant. That shouldn't be that difficult to get that information. Because I guess my thought is, I know this project's been pretty bumpy, but at the end of the day, we have about 1, maybe 2 more years to go after a $750,000 grant to develop the infrastructure, just like we did with Concomly. That's, what we paid for Concomly paid for the restroom, and it wasn't the signage because there wasn't any money. It was all grant money. And we just cannot afford to delay this project past September, because it's going to take 3 or 4, probably 3 months to write local government grant that's very, very well funded and very successful tool that Scappoose has used previously for their park. So whatever our issues, I hope that we can, as a group, help push this forward.
My guess is that there's probably, I mean, it seems like everyone's shorthanded and everything's pretty delayed right now. So I'm guessing we're kind of caught in that. Isaac, you think that's the concern, is that everything's a little bit behind right now?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're right on the edge of being done. It's just we don't have the final data, right? I mean, we don't just turn a consultant loose and not contact them. It's just that the data we have is only preliminary. It's, they say, hey, we've been out there and did this. This is the initial numbers, things like that. But until they write a final report, we don't have anything actionable for us to design plans around. And we can't really move a conversation forward until we have that solidified data. And so, back to what I was saying earlier, is we want to make sure that we're giving the right data, and we are right on the edge of that. That should be coming shortly. As soon as we have it, we'll be in communication. Slowdowns in part have been some staffing issues. Also, there's a large amount of this work going on right now. The ARPA money that's been out has had consultants who do this kind of work really, really, really busy, because every city has money to do things. And so the consultants that look at wetlands aren't just looking at them for parks; they look at them for buildings and other developments. And so they've been very busy. They're going to continue to be busy, which means things like this in the future will also be a little bit slower than we're used to.
All right, good. All right, thank you for that update, Isaac. Do we have additional questions or comments regarding the city updates that Isaac sent out?
Yes, with regard to the ARPA funds, which Kim and I worked on, and Kim gave great public feedback. So summarizing, you're saying is that even though we found literally thousands of cities that have used ARPA funds toward recreation amenities that are city attorney is advising us that that is not cannot be the case for Scappoose. Is that correct?
So the city attorney has not changed his mind about the interpretation of the ARPA rule. And, you know, as he said on the record, some of those cities can show an operating loss. So they have a parks levy or something that was impacted by, you know, the various things in the pandemic, or they haven't got park revenues from entrance fees and things like that. That's an operating loss. We don't have any of that to show. And he just hasn't changed his interpretation. You know, that's pretty much just where it lies. Yeah.
Okay, so secondarily, since some of the ARPA funds have been directed toward items that would normally be budgeted and do have a funding source, for instance, the police cars, do we now have basically space for items that we asked for? Because, you know, a police car is a wear item. I believe it had over 150,000 miles on it, so it's no surprise that it would need to be replaced. It would normally come from the police budget. I think we have a $45 million budget revenue source for the city. So now that we're taking that a very safe approach, which is using it for the police cars, that money would obviously become now available. Can we now slate that towards some of the items that we have projected for parks?
That question will best be handled with city council, who is the budget committee, and Peter in the room and Alex in the room, because I don't have that answer off the top of my head. I do know that, as explained at council, the police car issue was kind of a hidden issue. And it's not like we haven't budgeted for maintenance and replacement. It's just that all of our cars were purchased at the same year, at the same time, and so they're all failing at the same time. So we're kind of trying to play catch up on that. In terms of the question about is there money to shift in the budget, that is really definitely a question for council, and like I said, Alex and the lawyer. I'm happy to transmit it, but also, you know, you're no stranger to coming to city council meetings. If ARPA's on the agenda, that means there's public comment that could be had on the item, or even if it's not, right, you can still be had. So both of those avenues, I will talk with Alex and see if I can get a better response.
And lastly, your quote, your statement that said, and I don't know if this was in your opinion or if this is actually factual, and this is how we're abiding, that no capital spending at all on any amenities or any parks would happen until a renewed master plan is completed. Is that the case?
Council expressed the wishes to not start any new capital improvement projects. The small amenities don't necessarily fall under that, because there is some discretionary budget that the Public Works Director has to expend on small items like this through the year. Sometimes we use it to replace damaged equipment or signs, or to seed a new area of grass. Sometimes we use it to put in a new trash can as requested by the Parks Committee. So there's some wiggle room, but in terms of an actual new large capital project where we'd have to do planning, site development review, things like that, they have expressed the wish not to start doing that until after the master plan.
And so the time of the master plan, is that going to be after the 50-year plan?
No, they're going to coincide. So currently, we are in the middle of writing the RFP for the master plan. Our goal is to release that in early July, coinciding with the new budget year. Typically, those are out for about 30 days. It takes about 2 weeks to a month to get a consultant fully on board and a schedule lined up. So the 50-year plan will be running. And ideally, the Parks Master Plan revision and update will be complete before we get, you know, really into the next budget year. So not 2022, 2023, but 2023, 2024 is our goal. So because then we can use that data while we're looking at the 50-year plan to inform it, so we have the best available data for parks.
I just have something I want to interject really quick. You know, one of the things that I think as a Parks Committee, we really need to consider is alternative funding. I've been in conversation with Andrew at PCC for the past couple of years, and I'd come up with this idea. You know, obviously I'm very concerned about climate change. I've worked really hard so that we can get superchargers and charging stations by the library. You know, I spent a year working with Tesla on that. But it's, you know, one of the things that we were able to really accomplish when I was on the arts committee with St. Helens would be to do strategic partnerships with different organizations. I, have talked to Andrew extensively about seeing if students at OMEC could construct covered parking structures. I mean, covered picnic areas, in relation to climate change, and then maybe going to Tesla and having them donate roofing materials so that, there's some solar power. And so I think that I think it'd be worthwhile for us to consider that path to actually get projects done, because parks is really popular with businesses. The challenge is to make sure that you don't turn it into a big ad. But if you have organizations like the OMEC uh, portion of PCC. Fred Meyer has really great grants for different opportunities. And so it's just a matter of finding those opportunities and then allocating them for different projects. And then you're not so constrained with, getting money from the city.
I just wanted to finish up because I spent a lot of time and other people have spent a lot of time on projects. And, the current master plan is only 5 years old. And as Mike said, it was well written and there's still a lot of things to do in that. If you look at guides to master plans, usually the master plan doesn't stop and you don't do anything until the next one is done. It's usually a cascading type thing so that you can continue to roll and get things done. If it's truly the city's prerogative that we sit on our hands for 2.5 years and worry about signs and trash cans, well, at least we know. And we won't waste our time on and listening to citizens about amenities that we don't have money for. And I agree that I think that would be amazing to work on alternative funding. But we've spent a lot of time trying to work with the city. But if the city is indeed saying that for 2.5 years, we will not spend any money on parks above a fence being repaired or whatever. It's good for the Parks and Rec committee to know that and be able to tell the citizens the same, because we work for the citizens and they need to know that, hey, okay, our hands are tied for this period.
Well, but I think that sounds a little, I mean, I understand that, but I think that sounds a little adversarial. And I'm not,
Well, it's not adversarial. It's just I want to be
I understand. I know what you're saying. But what I'm telling you is that there is money out there. And so if there are things that you want to do, I have raised millions of dollars.
I get it. I just want to.
And
No, it's not. We're just with the city. That's all.
I know, I understand that, but I understand, but sometimes we need to take those frustrations and do something positive with it.
I totally agree. I just wanted to clarify with that.
Okay, I understand.
I would just add very, very quickly, we have heard from the mayor that there would be money in the budget for a pickleball court. So I'm not sure money is the issue. There might be lack of will to put some projects into place until we have this plan, which I think is maybe the concern.
Okay, all right. That's, thank you.
Okay, Isaac, go ahead.
So I just want to be clear that we've never been unclear about what's in the budget for parks. The budget is a public document. Anybody here and anybody in the public can go look at that document and see exactly how many dollars there are available to do these developments. And I can pretty much guarantee you that there is not enough money to do Grabhorn Park in that budget. So, we're not trying to be furtive. We're not trying to be secretive. We're not trying to be not transparent. And we've said many times there's just not enough money to do some of the things like buy another piece of property at this point when we have Grabhorn to be developed. The reason for the master plan update so quick is exactly what Mike said, which is that the master plan's got a lot of good meat in it. There's a lot of good information there, but there's just not any funding mechanisms described about how to make these things a reality. So the SDCs that we collect for parks are lower because there was never a funding stream dedicated to parks. The kind of revenues we have, which dictates what we have available to spend on parks improvements, is just not there because there's not really good cost estimates. And in the interim, anybody who's been to Lowe's or Home Depot knows the price of lumber materials is skyrocketed. And so all the costs that are in that master plan are wildly inaccurate at this point. And so it's really hard to know what it is we need to raise and how those SDCs fluctuate with that. But again, that's what the point of this master plan is to do, is to help to develop that, because right now we don't have the kind of revenue coming in that we'd like to be able to make the improvements.
If I
that,
can, I can just interject again really quick. So when we did the master plan, we had a rare student Nick was great. And when they were doing the master plan, I would continue, they would do stuff and I'd say, this is interesting, but how are we going to pay for it? We need to have funding in place. And that never happened. So, I understand your frustration. I was frustrated. It was like, you've got to be kidding me. And my challenge has always been in working, in different committees is that people come up with these great ideas, but if you don't have the money, it just gets shelved. And that is so common in government, and that's a real problem. You have to have the money.
So, I also just to interject, I think so. In the past few months, we have gained a lot of insight from the community. We have revamped Earth Day celebration. We have identified several small needs of the community that need to be done. We've worked to beautify the skate park. One of our goals is to identify more recreational opportunities with the senior center, with churches and their extra property, with the library. All of those things are more just, we don't really need a ton of capital for that. And so I understand the frustration of needing to wait for the master plan for larger projects. And I think that as we gain more information, I think that if we continue to say like, hey, Huel brought up a good point of like, okay, so we want pickleball courts, but what if that's not a great place? And then we needed to think of maybe some more potential places. So I don't know that some of these things are completely off the table. And I think that if for these some of these projects, they still might be achievable, but there's a lot that goes into them. But in the meantime, there's still so much that we can be potentially working on that are going to be really valuable and fruitful for this community. So I don't, it does feel like a little bit like like we're going to be doing nothing for the next 2.5 years. But I think we actually really have a good opportunity for maybe not focusing all of our time on parks and instead branching over to recreation and spending some time on that. And that is something that people ask for on a regular basis, but we spend a lot of time focusing just on parks.
Right. And I would just interject, one of the reasons why I started movies in the park with the library is that very reason. It's like parks are great, but people want to go do things. And so I worked with Jeff and Mike has been really helpful with that. And we're now into our 5th year and it's all volunteer. And we raise money by going to businesses, getting money or getting grants, and we make those things happen. And people love it.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I
Go
chime
ahead,
in real
Isaac.
quick? I did have another thought about this, and there was talk earlier in this meeting about a parks district, and depending on how that conversation goes and what information you find out, if that becomes a reality, then this discussion of funding becomes a little different, right? And the discussion of improvements becomes a little different because at that point there'll be a separate entity that's responsible, that has its own budget, its own funding stream to go do those things. So I think it's a nuanced conversation more so than just one thing or the other. And depending on
Right.
how that runs, this could have a very different outcome in a year than what
Absolutely.
we think it might be now.
And
Can I
yeah,
ask one question of Isaac?
yes.
So Isaac, you said, and I get it, there's not a lot of money to work with. I mean, buying picnic tables was a struggle. After we opened up, calmly, there was like 3 or 4 because that's all there was money for. So I think the city really does an amazing job of trying to do the best they
Oh,
can
yeah.
with their parks. But you said something about Grabhorn and that there was no money for Grabhorn. You're not talking about helping to prepare the concept and get it ready for a grant. And there's no, I mean, there's still an interest by the city to try and get through those issues and pursue a grant, right? The next year, is that fair to say, or?
That's right. All I was referencing was the budget number. If you go and look at the dollars in the budget, there's not $1 million for parks in there. And Grabhorn, the development of Grabhorn is going to be nigh on $1 million, right? Like if for some reason we were in a different alternate reality and we needed to do Grabhorn and we just didn't have a grant out of the city's pocket, we couldn't do it today. There's not that kind of money in there. And then you can go look at that budget number under parks, the parks SDCs, and you can see that number. And that's all I was referencing. It doesn't have to do with appetite, right? The cities, we just do what we're told council's told us
Well-
that we're doing a park, so that's what we're doing. It's just, it was about the additional capital improvement projects, and at this point in time, the way it looks like is that Grabhorn development's number one, and so ensuring that comes off is kind of the unspoken priority. But again, because it's a new park, it's a new property, as the master plan goes on, we'll get priorities about what is the priority and where does that money go first.
Well, I don't know about everybody else. I'm really excited about helping you guys get that project back online and moving forward because, you know, I think it really meets a lot of really important needs in this community. I mean, we don't have any place for our little girls to play softball. And we don't have any soccer fields, and
Hi.
a lot of the needs are pretty obvious. Thank you.
Just to add one more quick is that, you know, some of these things we're talking about is 0.06% of the budget. I mean, it's $45 million is going to be our revenue this year. And I'm not saying that, you know, I know money doesn't grow on trees, but we also see it allocated in other areas. And to be told, that's why I'm asking is that if you're really saying, okay, no capital expenditures, and that's how it's going to be, it will change, I think, how we approach things. And, you know.
Yeah, so I think there's a clarification that needs to be made about how the way public budgeting works. We don't just get a pot of $45 million to spend on whatever council wants. The vast
I understand
majority
that.
of those
I said
funds
that
are
more of just from a global.
Sure. And so it's we're not hiding, you know, if you want us to come back with information about, okay, what exactly is in the budget this year? What does that mean? You know, what's that look like? What's the context? We can definitely do that. So we can kind of, again, create that shared understanding of where we're at right now. I mean, that's not something that's been asked of us at this point. And we can most certainly do that. And then maybe out of that conversation, maybe that feeling is there, maybe it changes. I don't really know. But it's not, we don't have 45 million to put wherever we want. That money is, the majority of it is dedicated to certain funds that we can't, you know, the water SDCs, they have to go to water projects. They can't be moved to parks. That's just not transparent. That's not the way that we're allowed to raise and spend money. And so I've kind of wondered if this discussion was on the horizon where somebody in parks asked, okay, we want to reset. We want to understand what's in the budget. How does this process work? How do these things work? Why do you continuously say there's not a lot of money or the funds aren't quite there yet or X, Y, Z? And I mean, we can do that. That's just something the committee would have to put on the agenda.
I think that would be helpful. I think for the June meeting, when we discuss potential parks district, it might be helpful to also bring in budgeting as well.
All right, we can do that. We can do that for sure.
Different 40 different funds, and you know that hadn't never been through it. It's pretty educational. Not going to go though.
All right. Yeah, any other questions regarding the city updates? Okay, Kim.
Right. So I believe last month when I reported back on the first 50-year planning committee meeting, I talked about these community conversations that we have been asked to hold. Very simply, it's having conversations with different stakeholder groups within the city, just regular citizens themselves, asking them kind of what they value most about Scappoose, what they think are the best attributes, so that as we go forward in planning, we keep those in focus, but then also get a sense of what the community wants most as we look at growth in the future. So it's really 5 simple questions. So, you know, I hope that we can have the conversation amongst this group, but kind of hearing some of your comments all about the need to get kind of broader input about amenities in the future of parks. I would ask, you know, do we want to ask Isaac to kind of put it out there on social media for others in the public to come and join? So it is going to be a large focus of our next meeting agenda. So please plan on coming and I can circulate the questions to you guys in advance of that. You can prepare your thoughts, but do we want to have that kind of, you know, just as this group, or do we actively want to try to bring in other parts of Scappoose, people who are interested in the future of parks?
Thoughts?
I would think that we would just have it within the meeting and then once we clarify it, maybe opening it up to the public.
Okay.
Because the fact of the matter is anybody can listen in on these meetings. And then we do have a period of public comment at every meeting so that the public can interact.
I would agree.
Another thought I had about that, if you don't mind. I know it's your conversation. There are other community groups who I believe have tie-ins to parks. Scappoose Bay Watershed Council, SDIC. I'm sure there's some rec leagues or youth teams that use the parks, right? We know they use the parks for various activities, things like that. It might be worth it to reach out and maybe invite some of those groups to come if you're intending to have a more open community conversation, or potentially even host another conversation with those groups. Just a thought.
Yep, no, that's a great idea. And I did do a community conversation at the native plant sale. The Scappoose Bay Watershed Council, they were obviously busy with the plant sale, so they asked for me to come. And it's fun to just kind of talk to different, citizens of Scappoose and get their thoughts. And so I've made kind of a kit that's really easy to check out too. So maybe once we have the conversation, if you guys, JJ, if you've got a group that you want to have a conversation with, like you can easily check it out, record the feedback, get it back, and Jay at the city just captures it all. So it's pretty easy. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the idea of us kind of having our conversation initially, being able to kind of build a framework of where we want to go with it, and then kind of making some plans and maybe potentially have another meeting where we do invite folks in the community that just so that we feel kind of organized and prepared for that. Perfect. Okay. Any questions or comments regarding that for our next meeting? Okay, perfect. All right. Thanks for everyone for sticking it out tonight. We covered a lot of ground, but lots of good things. Hope to see people on Saturday, at least share things on social media. All right, everyone, have a good night.
Have a nice night. Thank you.
Take care,
Thank you,
Isaac. Good
Isaac.
job.
Isaac.
Bye.